You got zero at the table, man. All kinds of check breaks.
Pick me.
What goes with the table, you gotta be careful. Tons of fist breaks.
I quit. Done. Kaput. Finito. It's not just a financial decision, but also a mental health decision. Greetings, humans. Welcome back. I'm Joey Pigtails, and this is vlog number 47. And as the thumbnail reads, I quit. Let me explain. About a month ago, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and one part of this conversation has really stuck with me. His words keep bouncing around in my brain, and nothing I do seems to make them go away. And maybe they shouldn't, because I've made some changes in my life, and quite honestly, I didn't think I would feel this good. I had a conversation with an old friend of mine from my WWE Raw Deal days, whom I hadn't spoken with in over a decade. This phone call went on for well over an hour, and we touched upon a great many topics, from gaming to work to life choices to everything in between. But there was one part of this conversation that literally changed my life. I'm paraphrasing and summarizing a bit, but my friend John says, "You have a tendency to dumb yourself down in an attempt to relate to other people." Hearing this, I was taken aback. This is one of the deepest and most complicated things I have ever had to think about. And it was about more than just the way that I speak or the words I choose to use. The revelation led me down the path to considering my dependency on cannabis, how it made me feel, and how it changed the way I interacted with the world. Cannabis was a crutch. It let me ignore a lot of the important and impactful things in my life, and gave me an out to numb a lot of the hardships and pain that I avoided dealing with for a really long time. I looked at cannabis like an answer, but in reality, it was more like a contributing symptom to the issues I was facing in my life, and a complication that was holding me back from reaching the goals I wanted to hit. A major excuse I used for my cannabis use was my autism, how literal and awkward I could be when I wasn't high. While cannabis helped me to seem a bit more normal in social situations, this conversation with John helped me to realize that I was using cannabis to try and change myself to be something that I wasn't, and to try and fit some sort of mold for what I thought I should be as a human. For the longest time, I thought I was fighting battles with other people to get what I wanted out of life. But the real battle, the war that I didn't want to acknowledge that I was fighting, was always with myself. I decided to stop running and hiding. As of this posting of this video, I've been cannabis-free for 50 days. It isn't easy, but it is getting easier as each day passes. The mental clarity I feel now that I have this out of my system is quite astonishing, to be frank. There's a sharpness to my mind that I'm just now realizing I had buried beneath years of cannabis use. The next time you see me at a poker table, you're going to be meeting an entirely new version of me. A version that isn't burdened or bogged down by haze, and I'm looking forward to meeting you all again. I'll be talking about this journey more with my future vlogs, and I appreciate the support and camaraderie from you all. Before I get into the hands, I first want to give a shout out to a handful of people who've been there for me over the past few months, lending me their ears, their time, and their energy as I fought my battles. Specifically, Evan, Charlie, Corey, Mark, and John, whom I mentioned earlier. I'm immensely appreciative of your input, honesty, and overall support through this time in my life. Now, like all of you who watch my vlog, I originally cut my teeth in poker through No Limit Hold'em. The following hands are from the Almighty Stack tournament I played at the end of July in Daytona with a 100K starting stack. Will I make it to day 2 and get into the money? Check this out. There are a couple limps to me, and I decide to limp pocket deuces looking to see a cheap flop. There's another limp before the button raises to 3,500 and all 4 of us limpers come along. On 952 Rainbow, I flop bottom set and it's check to me. The pre-flop raiser is on the button and checking in flow is a thing, but I decide to take a different route. You've probably heard this action referred to as a donk bet. If you hold this mindset, I'd encourage you to rethink it. I lead for 10K, about half pot, getting a call from the original raiser and one other player in front of me. The turn is the 7 of hearts, and it's check to me again. Now, my hand should still be nutted here, as we don't expect the player on my right to call a raise pre-flop and then check call the flop with 8-6. The original raiser is sort of capped at 1 pair here unless they are trapping with top set, so I bet 27K, leaving about 50K behind. The original raiser calls and the other player folds. The river is the 8 of diamonds, which on its surface seems like a horrible card, putting a one-liner out there. Now, my hand is far from the nuts here, but hand reading tells me a lot about the strength of my opponent's hand. He simply cannot have anything here other than top set of 9s or an overpair, and if he has a set of 9s, he probably doesn't feel good about his hand right now. You'll notice the other players at the table have walked away. We're on break right now. I decided to jam for value here, expecting a pretty quick fold, but instead, my opponent goes into the tank. As the minutes go by, the crowd begins to grow as they are curious about the outcome too. I don't want to discourage a call, but I need to hit the restroom before the break ends. I eventually speak up and say,
"Ain't enough time to go to the bathroom, my friend."
and the floor gives him 30 seconds to act. He eventually makes the fold, and I pick this one up without having to show. He said he had queens, which makes a lot of sense based upon the action. I open red 7s to 3K at the 1200 big blind level, which only gets one call from the big blind. On 6-6-2 rainbow, it's check to me, and I elect to check this back. Maybe a bet would have been better with an overpair. The turn is a 4, and when check 2, I delay c-bet 4,000, expecting fold a lot of the time, but my opponent comes along. The turn is a 9, and my opponent checks again. Now, I can bet again, but worse is never calling here, or so my thinking goes. I elect to check back, and my opponent shows ace-9 offsuit for a river bigger pair. Ah, that sucks. The big blind is now 1600, and that's where I am with queen-6 offsuit. I check my option after seeing 2 late position limps and the small blind complete. On ace-queen-10 rainbow, middle pair is pretty marginal, so I check to see it checked around. The turn is a 3, bringing in a potential flush draw, and I check again to evaluate. The cutoff checks, and the button snap bets 2500 into 8,000, and the small blind folds. My spidey senses are tingling here. I would have expected a hand with an ace in it to not only bet the flop, but to have raised pre-flop from late position, so what sort of story does this bet tell? I put the call out there, and the other player folds. The river is an 8, which is not the best card. I check intending to call a reasonable bet, but my opponent checks back and announces he has a 10. I roll over my queen and I take this one down. It's about an orbit later and I look down at king 5 of hearts on the button with blinds at 1k 2k. There are 2 limps to me and I limp as well to see the big blind check. The king of diamonds in the window gives me top pair. It's checked around to me and I bet 4,000 again, expecting to take this down, but the big blind makes the call. The turn is the 3 of spades and my opponent checks again. I have a lot of equity here, so I fire 11k for value and looking to build a bigger pot, but my opponent makes the fold and I end up taking this one down without a fight. I want to remind you all that no limit hold'em is a game of aggression. Here's a lesson along those lines. We see a late position open to 5.2k, and I elect to call from the small blind with ace-queen offsuit, as does the big blind. I flop top with the nut flush blocker and decide to check and flow, expecting the original raiser to c-bet so I can check raise. However, it gets checked around really quickly. The turn is an ace, and I now have top 2 pair. I took the passive line on the flop and decided to do that again here. The big blind checks, and now we see a bet of 7k. I have a monster now, and I feel like raising takes the pot down instead of getting more value, so I call, and the big blind calls as well. There we go. The river is a 4, which shouldn't change much for the original raiser's hand, but may improve the big blind. I check, the big blind checks, and now we see a bet of 26k. I don't want to waste too much time seeking a call out there, so I do, and the big blind folds, and we get the bad news, ace 5. If I would have led flop, I'd probably have taken this one down. The very next hand with blinds still at 1k 2k, I see 2 limps in front of me and look down at pocket jacks on the button, electing to raise to 6.5k. How do you feel about that sizing? The blinds fold and both limpers make the call. On 9-6 deuce 2 diamonds, I avoid seeing an overcard come out. It's checked to me and I fire out 12k, about half pot, and both players fold. It feels good to win a hand after value owning myself the hand prior, but taking it down on the flop probably means I missed a bunch of value. This table has been playing relatively passive, which is why you see me complete the small blind for 1k more with this marginal hand after seed 1 limps. On ace king jack 2 spades, I'm more or less done with this hand and check to see it check through. The 4 of spades gives me a flush draw, but I check again and it's checked through once more. The 3 of spades river brings in that flush, and now I lead for 5k. Now, this bet is sort of spazzy as I can't really expect to get called by worse. I then see the big blind raise to an amount I can't make out, but it's pretty clear I'm behind as this player really hasn't taken any aggressive lines up to this point, so I fold my mediocre flush and move on. I've been the most active player at the table so far, as it should be. Seat 1 limps again, and I open ace-10 offsuit from late position to 6.5k. The button calls, and now you'll notice seat 9 is wagging his finger at me. That's a sign I'm being viewed as playing too many hands by the table, but I'm just playing what I'm dealt. It looks like he has a decent hand, but he decided to fold it, while seat 1 comes along. On 8-7-3-2 hearts, I missed this flop, but decided to c-bet 11k when check 2 since everyone has been folding so much. The button folds, but seat 1 decides to come along. The king of hearts gives me some equity, and when check 2, I think a bet is in order, except I decide to check back here. Would you have followed through with a second barrel? If so, how much? The river brings in the flush, and while I don't technically have the nuts, I'm quite relieved to see it. My opponent now goes into the tank, shuffling some chips for a bit, before firing out a bet of 30,000, about half of what he has left. I Hollywood a bit, and put the jam out there. My opponent goes into the tank for about 45 seconds more, but eventually makes the fold. I go ahead and show the ace of hearts for a few reasons, mostly because I want to be able to keep up the aggression and take pots down without having to have go to showdown. And sadly, that table broke and I've been moved to a much tougher and deeper table. I spent an orbit folding a bunch of junk and getting a feel for the table before I looked down at this beauty. I opened a 7k at the 3k blind level, getting a call from the hijack and the small blind. On queen 6 deuce rainbow, I don't hit a pair, but I should be viewed as being pretty tight, so I c-bet 12k when check 2, getting a fold from the hijack and a call from the small blind. The turn is an 8, completing the rainbow. My opponent checks, and I stay on the gas pedal, betting 26k, which ends up getting a fold. Remember, a game of aggression. We see 2 limps in front of me before I raise to 12k with ace-10 suited. The button, small blind, big blind, and both limpers make the call, and wow, this feels just like PLO. With 76k in the pot, we see 5-6 ace rainbow. The small blind checks, and the big blind now leads for 65k, a massive bet. He has about 40k behind, and I'm sitting on about 175k total. The 2 players in front of me fold, and I've got a decision to make. It's possible the big blind flopped a set or 2 pair or has some sort of draw, and leading into this many players is usually pretty ballsy without having a decent bit of equity, so what do I do here? I didn't take too long, but the decision was to go ahead and jam. I didn't flop an ace in this massive pot to fold now. He didn't snap call, which was good, but he did call with 7-8 of clubs for an open-ended straight draw. The board ran out with a 3 of clubs in the turn, giving him even more outs, but the jack of diamonds on the river let me scoop this massive pot and jump up to over 300,000 chips. It's been a while since I played any major hands. Being card dead is a thing. I open ace-jack suited to 20k over the 8k big blind and get 1 call from the player on my left. On 8-king-7-2 hearts, I flop the nut flush draw and put out a c-bet of 25k, eventually getting a call. The 7 of spades turn isn't ideal, but being a game of aggression and having the betting lead as the aggressor, I fire out another bullet of 60k and get the fold that I was looking for. There we go, baby. Here's another nice starting hand. I continue with a 2.5x open at 20k, seeing 1 call from the button in seat 3. On ace-ace-jack-2 diamonds, I elect a down bet for 15k, which my opponent calls. Now, I haven't been down betting at all so far, but this opponent is pretty new to the table, so I don't think he can correlate that. The turn is the 4 of diamonds, bringing in the front door flush. I decide to check as there are a lot of hands that I'm behind, but my mistake is checking without exactly having a plan. My opponent put out a bet of 30k, and I put in the call. The river is the 8 of spades, more or less a blank. After calling the bet on the turn and seeing this blank on the river, I elect to check again, seeing my opponent put out a bet of 60k, which is about 25% of what I have left. I could hero call in this spot, being ahead of non-paired hands that have a single diamond in them, but I'm behind every ace-ace combo, as well as hands like king-jack with the king of diamonds that would semi-bluff the turn, even though I'm heavily blocking those hands. Ultimately, I elect to fold as I honestly had no idea where I was in this hand after giving up the betting lead on the turn. Here's another 2.5x open, sizing I've come to love. I make it 25k with king-jack offsuit, only getting one call from the small blind. On a queen-high flop, my opponent checks pretty quickly, and I elect to check this one back. My opponent's been really sticky, and I just don't expect him to fold anything to a bet. The turn is a 3, bringing in another club, and my opponent checks again. I take the safe route and check this back again, although a bet will probably get the riffraff to fold out here. The river is the king of clubs, bringing in the backdoor flush, and my opponent quickly flicks out a single chip, 25k. I'm not folding top pair here, so I toss out the call and get the good news. A couple orbits later, I see king-jack again and open to 30k over the 12k big blind from the button when folded to. The big blind now jams for 75k total, and I call it off. I can't see what he had, but I end up winning without having to improve, so it was probably a worse king that didn't hit a pair. My table broke, and I've been moved into the 5 seat again at a new table. I have the best possible camera angle, but I failed to capture what my hand was. The good news is it's good enough to open to my standard 2.5x. The button now raises to 75k, and it's folded back to me. I'm sitting on about 260k and decide to rip it in with this mystery monster, getting a fold and chipping up a bit more. I've been moved again, and we're getting close to the bubble, needing to lose about 10 more players to get there. The blinds have risen twice since the last hand you saw, now sitting on a 30k big blind. We see a limp from seat 6, and I elect to raise to 80k with king-jack suited. It's folded around to the limper, who leans back in his chair with his arms crossed, clearly not liking the situation, before he eventually makes the fold, and I chip up just a little bit more. I open king-9 of spades to 60k, seeing calls from both the small blind and the big blind. On 8-6-3 rainbow, this is a flop that nails both of the blinds flatting range. We see a lead from the small blind of 125k, about half of what I have remaining, and I just can't continue here. I'm under the gun this hand and look down at pocket 4s. We're really close to the bubble, and most players are overfolding pre-flopped, so I elect to jam my last 250k in there, hoping to take this down. Seat 2 goes into the tank for what feels like an eternity, but he eventually makes the fold, and the rest of the players don't waste any time folding their cards, letting me take this down and picking up the blinds, giving me a little bit of breathing room going into the blinds the next hand. We see a limp from our friend in seat 6, and I look down at king-jack again. A hand I've been dealt with seems like a dozen times so far. We are 2 players from bagging and being in the money, and while it would be nice to make day 2, I didn't come here to play it safe. I ripped my last 250k in there, hoping for more folds, but seat 6 limped with aces, and I'm in a world of hurt. I see some hope with a jack on the flop, but there are 2 queens there as well, so I have to hit one of the last 2 jacks to win this and stay alive. Sadly, I fail to improve, and I end up bubbling this event. Aw, I was so close to bagging and cashing that I could taste it, but it wasn't meant to be this time around. I've recorded a bunch of hands from a PLO double board bomb pot tournament at Orange City, and I'll be going through those hands to see if I have enough for a proper vlog. If so, that will be coming out soon. As far as the next time you'll see me at Orange City, I'm not sure right now. I've picked up a full-time job that I've recently started, and I've been training quite intensively, so probably once I settle in. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Joey Pigtails, and I am transparent, reminding you to be a good human. Bye!